What does ripe mangoes
Yeah.
mean?
Well, I mean, I have a story to share, which maybe we won't use it, but I'll share it, and it'll go where it'll go. Um,
Sounds like the perfect start.
Yes.
yeah. So I have two younger cousins who are now 18 and 19, but a few years ago they were
Oh la la.
16 and 17, and they have friends as teenage girls do, and I was at a family function. These two other girls were their two sisters who are friends of my cousins. And one of them was this beautiful, beautiful, mature looking girl. And we we locked eyes a few times, and from her I got what I could only describe as a like a I want you, right? Physically, look. And I was like, yeah, like me too. But in my head I'm like, I'm 25, you're 16, this is wrong. And so I let it I for a split second I kind of reciprocated and then I shut it down. And then I don't know, 5 minutes later, we had that gaze again, and it was there, and I shut it down again. And um, after that, it never came back. And I've seen her since then, and it's always been a friendly, "Hey, guy, I know. Look." N Never that kind of carnal attraction again, right? And that's fine. She was 16, I was 25. It was never going to happen. Um, but I almost wish that there was that I handled it differently. That because I felt like she may have felt undesired and
Mm.
even a bit hurt by my withholding, right? And was there a way that I could have handled that better, right? Which I, you know, recognized her beauty as a beautiful young girl and did the right thing and said that we can't do this, but you are a beautiful woman. I wonder what your
How
thoughts are on that.
how would you handle it differently? Like, do you have an image in your mind of what would be real grace?
Maybe just in some moment when she walks by and we're a little bit away from the group, just saying like, hey, like, um, I caught you looking at me, and I just want to say that I think you're beautiful, but you're 16, I'm 25, and you know, and just maybe just chuckled and just left it at that, and she probably would have blushed, and I would have blushed, and
Mm.
she would have at least known that I see her, I saw her, right?
I love your story. And I think it's one of these examples where if there were just a scene or two in cinema that showed how this could be handled, then that would unlock a different solution space,
Mm,
right? You would have an image or a possibility in mind. And I think of Brad Pitt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. There's a scene in that where Brad Pitt is, the coolest Brad Pitt you can imagine in any Brad Pitt film. And he picks up a 16-year-old girl on the side of the road and she's super flirtatious. And you're thinking, this is only going to end in sex. And then you watch Brad Pitt and he, first of all, has it not end in sex, which would have been a violation. She's underage. But neither does he close down his really cool sexual energy. So that's one way of looking at it, and that's in his character. But there are many ways that you could recreate that dynamic. I would certainly check it out.
I'm going to. Yeah, it's fascinating.
But I get you in the story. It's like if you lock it down once, lock it down twice, it's locked down forever, and there could be a hurt. And there's a hurt in her, but I'm also hearing there's a hurt in you.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not showing up. I could have shown up in a certain way, in a healthy way, in a celebratory way that didn't shut down my sexuality, and I'm disappointed. Yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah.
And I imagine there's a moral hurt, which is, oh no, that would have hurt her and I don't like who I was. But also there would be a physical, energetic hurt in the moment of like, you have to clamp down on some pelvic muscles, the diaphragm has to kick in, the hips have to seize up, like, keep it restrained, right? There's a physical aggravation that you create around that scenario. It's dicey. So this whole concept, it's such a crude word. I mean, really should have thought of this a bit better. Ripe mangoes, right? But what I'm talking about here is we don't. No one's having this conversation that I know of in my particular English speaking culture. So we find ourselves unable to articulate it and with no guide to get out. I think actually in continental Europe, people talk about this in wider ways. But it's a fact of our biology. And when a young woman hits her first moments of, let's say, peak fertility or her first season of fertility, usually she's unaware of that, and yet her body is aware. And to be doubly crude, we had kittens in our house a few years ago. We had a stray cat, and she gave birth to kittens. After a few months, we had a girl kitten, and the girl kitten was in heat for the first time. And I literally saw one of the male kittens with a face of complete absent-mindedness just walk over to the girl kitten, his sister, and climb on the back of her. And he was like wiggling around, trying something to put it in. And his cat face had no expression. He was completely vacant, but the body was doing its thing. And in the end, I'm supposed to be some sex positive, helpful dating coach. I picked my cat up. No, I'm not having any incest in my kitchen. It separated them. But what's amazing is the body and the nature just knows what to do. And when the female is in heat, then the male has a corresponding irritating force of his own sexual energy. He responds to that heat, and there is a particular thing that has to happen. He has to try and climb up the back of her and make the sexual irritation go away. And that's how sex happens, and we have that, and it's in our mammalian wiring. But of course, we are conditioned, and I think it's a good thing that we don't do that. We don't jump up and down on each other like bonobos. But then, what happens to that initial energy that is in all of us? And that's a real question that's painful. And I remember, like I think I said to you guys earlier, I'm sorting through all my old photos from my teenage years, and there's a girl I remember, and she was a year younger than me in school. And I was always on the lookout for the next beauty at school, right? So I saw her, and I thought, wow, because I found her and I figured her out. I said hi to her a few times. She's kind of mine in my own, adolescent world. I saw her first. She's mine, and she was so beautiful. And then one year she really rounded out and kind of ripened, let's say. Her body just came into this proportionality, which was too much to bear. And I was both completely obsessed by the erotic thought of her, but I was also kind of romantically flailing around at the fantasy or the dream that I might at one point have her to fall in love with. And it was this really strange sensation where both the erotic force in my lower body, which was so strong, it was in a state of irritation, which I compressed, but my heart was in a state of, I need your approval, I want you to want me the same way that I want you, I want this reflected back, that I would be turned on and heartbroken at the same time. I could almost, she would walk by or give me a hug in the schoolyard, and I could almost, be erect and cry. And this mixture of emotions is so terrible. Like to fall into this natural knotted up, I've got nothing. It's like the alien counter, but the other way around. Like I'm just reduced to this mess. And I do not have the capacity to own my sexuality, and I do not have the bravery to speak what's on my heart, because I'm afraid of anything and everything that might happen, and I'm left to suffer with these feelings. And they take months to go away. And then at other points in my life, there's another woman that came along, another woman who just ripened in front of me, and I couldn't take the intensity. So we don't have a conversation about this. What do you do as a young man? You tell your friends you got a crush on someone, hey, just do this and that. No understanding, no wisdom, no advice, but excruciating pain. And I've known for a fact, and this dissipates, you get into your 30s and the feeling's not quite as strong anymore, but certainly I've worked with men in their 20s, when this feeling of being so horny, so turned on by a particular woman matches the need, like I really want her to want me too. If there is a knockback or a rejection, I've known men who will then go into their room and hide for weeks in cycles of video games and masturbation and bad food and saying no to everything. I cannot take being alive with these feelings. I don't know if you guys resonate with this, but I found it a huge piece of our biology that tangles up in some of the biggest knot-like pain imaginable.
And at those times, we have nothing to reference of like, what do I do? It's not only the most intense bodily feeling, one that we have no practice at kind of letting the entire body feel, like it's so concentrated, so tensed. And then with the massive confusion in the brain of, I have no reference of what to do. I don't have either the role model who showed me how to invite this experience, or maybe I did, but I didn't actually learn. I didn't actually learn it. That's a killer combination for shame.
Yeah. And I'm thinking now of sending her 40 text messages and then deleting them all. Or if you delete them too late, then she's seen them and they all contradict each other. Just wanted to say this. Oh, ignore the last message. I didn't mean that. You know, for 12 hours, sat there on the phone, sending things I wish I didn't. Well, I think, let's say you have this giant knot of desire that builds up and you have no real clear way of channeling all that desire. So it pours out in its rightful way towards its rightful place. And not in an animalistic way, but in a graceful human way. Ideally, you should be able to channel your desire in a way that feels good to you, feels good to her. And you can, if she's a no, you can walk away and still feel okay and have that desire. But the path to learning that is extreme. And if all these energies come together as a knot, what are you going to do psychologically to then deal with that? And that's where this is a psychological question, or a psychoerotic question. How is your sexual energy going to play out within you over the course of your life? And some guys get quite comfortable with this erotic energy, but they tend to become overcomfortable with the sexualized version of it. They close down their heart and they learn how to sleep with a lot of women, perhaps without feeling. So you might become a sensualist, as it's been called. And some guys just pretend it's not there, but then they put all their activity up into the brain. The energy comes out of the body and into the brain, and they judge everyone else. Shouldn't do this. You're just a player. You don't know how to treat women. Yeah, you're a bad guy, not like a good guy like me. Some people moralize around this energy. Some people go into the realm of obsession, romantic infatuation, and they might pine for a particular woman for years and years. I did a bit of this, embarrassed to admit. And it was very difficult to come out of this, just thinking, wow, this woman provokes this whole knot of desire within me. If only I had that woman, then I wouldn't feel the knot. Everything would be okay. But that turns into daydreaming, romantic stories, limerence, as it's been called. You think you're in love, but it's not really love. You're just projecting a daydream and walking around having a comfortable daydream all day long as a way to escape the difficult feelings in your body. So all, I think, sexual neurosis and the patterns we create come with the inability to deal with these emotions. Sorry, they're not emotions. They're hormonal, biological drives tangled up with a few emotions.
So I guess my question is, when we bring it back to kind of the overwhelm that we feel when our maybe sexual life force kind of is turned on for the first time and we have no way of dealing with it, or at least no experience of dealing with it, is sexuality the first big overwhelm of eros in many people's lives? And because it's so intense that we turn ourselves off from eros entirely, if we can't learn to handle it, or maybe handle is the wrong word even. Handle is buying into this idea that it's something poor.
Those are cool questions. there are a couple of big sweeping statements in there. So I wouldn't want to jump and say it's the great first big overwhelm, but for sure, all the things that happen between the ages of, say, 15 and 20, in a boy's life, in a girl's life, there's ground in there for first love, first sexual encounter, first kiss, first heartbreak, first infatuation, first unrequited love experience. All these things can be extremely overwhelming. And I think what's important, that's such a crucial age. What I think we need in that age is some frame of reference. I think we need art that sees us. We need to have stories and movies that document those loves and losses and kickbacks and pains in a really good way. I'm not talking about like teen romance movies that turn it all into a romantic comedy, because that fills our head with Hollywood expectations, right? For how romance, like all this stuff like the Virgin Next Door or whatever. Oh yeah, I'm a loser next door, and it's my 18th birthday, so I'm just going to wake up and the hot girl is going to jump on me. Like there's nonsense films. So I think we need places we can go to that reflect back the reality of what we feel. And I think, and this is maybe a taboo thing to say, I haven't fully thought it out, there's a role for the older generation in this. And one kind of awkward question is, how much of my young messing about figuring out relationships should my parents see? Or how many of those relationships or loves or lusts between 15 and 20 should an aunt or uncle see? Or should I have an older brother or sister that sees? I think I pined for as a teenager to have, let's say, a wise older brother or sister that could understand what I was going through and help me out with advice. Because we go through that alone, and certainly at school, all I want is that my friends think that I've got it together and that I don't have problems with women and that I can figure out my entire way through that. I think there's a space where an older figure has to come in and say, you're suffering. I know it's the ripe mango thing. You're on heat. You're desperate and you're dying to do this. And not only that, but you're in love and you're attached and you're making up fantasies. And I see you and I support you, and it's going to take time and it's going to hurt. And we're going to try and get you through it in a beautiful way. I feel like this is probably the missing piece of our whole culture. That means that boys grow up into manhood and they have no idea what to do with this whole cluster of feelings.